The good thing is that there is no need to introduce Yossi Kuperwasser. Just only the one sentence that you all know. He's a senior project manager at the Jerusalem Center, former Director General of the Ministry of International Affairs and Strategy, and I leave it here. But I cannot stay with calling Ahmed a friend of CAS without calling Yossi a good friend of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. That I have to say. Knowing the temper of Yossi, I know he is always brief. So now my hopes are all on your shoulders, Yossi. You have the word.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you all for staying all these hours until now. And I hope that I'll leave you with a good taste before you go out. I'll skip all what I had to say about the past, just that the lion tamer would hit me with, and go directly to where we stand today. And where we stand today is some sort of a reaction to everything that happened in the past, of course. It's a reflection of the ignorance and the wrong assumptions that not only Sykes-Picot, but also the people who later shaped the Middle East, in Sever and in all these San Remo and so on and so forth, had about the Middle East. They didn't understand how strong religion is in the Middle East, for example, one thing that was totally missed. They didn't understand the strong belief in primordial connections in the tribe and things like that. Sects, Sunnis, Shiites, and all of that were pretty much ignored. And so what we ended up with today, after the cap, after the lead put over the Middle East by the Sykes-Picot that miraculously held for almost 100 years, for 95 years, it held because of autocratic regimes, because of the easiness with which the elites in the Middle East enjoyed the benefits of this system and kept it alive. But when it was taken away 5 years ago, the Middle East was shaped in a totally different situation. So you have here the Sykes-Picot concept of how the map should look like. And basically it was based on three major ideas: that there is going to be Arab nationalism, both in the broader sense and in the particular sense. Syria, Iraq, things like that can turn into a nation. And the second idea was that those Arabs will be pretty obedient to our Western superiority, and they will behave properly and enable us to protect our interests while they perform some kind of Westphalian or not Westphalian control of their own business. And the third one was coming up later, not in the Sykes-Picot itself, but and this is a wonderful opportunity to solve the Jewish question. Let's let the Jews have some piece of land of their own, and we can reconstitute the national home of the Jews in Palestine. And all of that, of course, caused a lot of turmoil later on. And what happened when the lead was taken away, we ended up with this situation. This is the Middle East we are facing today. Actually, in the Middle East we are facing today, it is divided between the different powers that really control the Middle East. First, you have the Iranian Empire, okay? That was not mentioned until now almost at all. But you have the Iranian Empire. The Iranians control, of course, Iran, but they also control the southern part of Iraq to a large extent, through Muqtada Sadr or wherever. They have a lot of influence in the western parts of Syria and on considerable parts of Lebanon. That's the Iranian Empire. And they are coming closer and closer to areas on our borders, both in Lebanon and in the northern part of the Golan Heights. The second area that is worth mentioning is the areas controlled by the pragmatic Sunni Arabs. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, of course, Egypt. This is the major camp that is facing the Iranian Empire. The third element is the ultra-radical Sunnis. They have their own empire here, or areas they control. It is the northern part of Iraq. It is the eastern side of Syria. It is part of Yemen. It is parts of Libya. And they have presence here and there in some other places as well. The radicals are a force that's becoming stronger and stronger all the time. Sometimes they lose some territory, sometimes they gain some territory, but in the hearts and the minds of the people of the Middle East, they gain more and more control, and that's what should be worrying us most. And eventually, we have those areas controlled by the realistic radicals, as I call them. Realistic radicals of the Middle East are the Muslim Brothers. What's the difference between them and the ultra-radicals? The ultra-radicals believe that the West is so weak, so do the Iranians, by the way, or the Iranian regime of Khamenei, believe that the West is so weak that there's no point in waiting until we take steps in order to strengthen our control of the Middle East and taking steps against the West in the West, that we can do it right away. We can establish a caliphate. Why spend more time waiting for that to happen? The realistic radicals say, the West is weak, but not that weak. Let's wait a little bit before we take action against the West. And in the meanwhile, because the West is weak, we can be those people who work for the interest in the West in the Middle East by taking steps against the ultra-radicals who are threatening the West right away. So if we provide our good services to the West, we shall be able to gain a lot from the West. For example, a wonderful deal that will enable us to have an arsenal of nuclear weapons in 15 years. Talking about Iranian realistic radicals. For example, getting a lot of money and other benefits from the West, like the Turks do. And in exchange for holding the refugees from going to Europe, right? All kinds of services that we realistic radicals can provide the West, and in exchange get all kinds of goodies that will make our position stronger in the Middle East itself. Those realistic radicals control Turkey, control Qatar, and have a presence, of course, in, or actually control the Gaza Strip. And when it comes to the Sunnis, and they are a part of the regime in Iran that is not that powerful, but is very instrumental in misleading the West about what is actually Iran. And this is the battle we are facing. In fact, what we can say is that the West, unlike what characterized the West until 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, has lost the appetite to intervene in the Middle East. And everybody, somebody mentioned before Ben Rhodes, you can read Obama himself in his interview with Jeffrey Goldberg, where he says very clearly, we have lost nothing in the Middle East. That's the way it is today, and we should cut our losses in this part of the world, and because that's why we are moving out. And he calls, actually, he looks at this map, and he calls upon the Saudis in this interview to share the influence in the Middle East with the Iranians, because he sees the map, he sees the areas controlled by the Saudis, so to speak, and he says, or actually the pragmatic camp, and he sees the areas controlled by the Iranian camp, and he says to himself, why can't they share it? Let them share it. It's anyhow shared already between them. Let them agree on those new lines, not the Sykes-Picot. Let them agree on new lines that characterize the Middle East. That is the situation where we stand. And this decision of the West to minimize its investment in the Middle East has a tremendous impact on the way the Middle East develops. Because it means that the pragmatics are losing ground and are very fearful about the future, and are taking all kinds of steps in order to change the situation. For example, one of the things is President Sisi's speech of yesterday. He understands that in order to strengthen the situation of the pragmatic camp, he got to have better cooperation with Israel and to prevent the radicals from having more tools to spread their influence. And that's why he's moving towards promoting a new initiative that would hopefully make some progress on the peace process. And that's why, by the way, he was ready also to give the Saudis the two islands. There's a clear attempt on the side of the pragmatic camp to strengthen its position, to strengthen its defenses against the radicals who are threatening both the Iranians and the all kinds of Sunni radicals who are all threatening the pragmatic camp. What does that mean to Israel? First of all, there are many challenges emanating from this situation. First of all, the strengthening of the radicals is a major threat for Israel. In the previous situation, when there was an address that was committed to a rational way of thinking and could have been deterred, it was easier for Israel to protect its borders. As the radicals gain more and more power, and as the states are failing, and there's no monopoly on the use of force from the territories that are under their sovereignty, the threats to Israel are growing all the time. Fortunately, for the time being, most of them are busy fighting each other. But there's no guarantee that this is going to continue for a prolonged period of time, and we might find ourselves threatened by all kinds of radical elements. And I want to tell you something about these crazy guys. They are not easy to contend with militarily. Look, nobody managed to overcome them. Even the Americans say it's going to take years before we really take care of ISIS, and believe me, from a military point of view, they are not such a big power. And ask the Russians about Afghanistan. And ask the Iranians about dealing with them right now. The amount of casualties on the Iranian and the Hezbollah side is just another expression of their, what being zealot means on the battlefield. So we have to contend with these guys. Secondly, this new situation enables totally irresponsible elements to put their hands on all kinds of very lethal weapons. So in the short period, it seems that, okay, nobody used it against us so far. But in Syria, in the context of the battle inside Syria, both sides have probably already used chemical weapons. This is not a taboo anymore. And as time goes by, these elements are going to get closer and closer also to all kinds of nuclear capabilities, because the Iranians, in 15 years, even if they abide by the agreement, are going to have a big arsenal of nuclear weapons. And in the meanwhile, they can share some of these capabilities with Hezbollah, for example. So the kind of threats we in Israel are going to face in the future are different in their nature and in the capability to deter people from using them than they were in the past. Even with Syria, Syrians had chemical weapons for a long time. It was relatively easy to deter them from using them. In the future, it's not going to be that easy. And there's not going to be Syria in the future. Everybody has already said it. Third, Israel should be worried from the point of view of security from the gap, the growing gap between us and the West in understanding the situation in the Middle East. The West has adopted a worldview that's based on some sort of an attempt to redeem its terrible deeds in the past, Sykes-Picot one of them. The way George Antonius presented it made everybody in the West believe that they did something terrible to the Arabs. And now is the time to compensate the Arabs for that. So and as they move out and try to compensate the Arabs, and also are very worried about the growing Muslim communities in their own countries, that is becoming a bigger consideration in their way of determining their policy. The gap between Israel and its natural support base in the West, even if we see a different policy coming from Washington in the coming 4 years, is going to be quite significant. And we have to bear that in mind.
The call to end.
Yeah, I'm coming to the last sentence. On the other hand, just as the last sentence, it's not only challenges. There are also opportunities here. The first opportunity relates to what I said earlier about President Sisi. I think Israel and the pragmatic states have a very close worldview. We have the same enemies. We have the same understanding about what is radical Islam and what does it represent, and the need to say that all radical Muslims are dangerous, not only the ultra-radicals, but also the realistic radicals. They are also dangerous. And that is something that I think Michael mentioned earlier in the morning, about the fact that we have to look deeper into what Muslim Brotherhood actually represent. And this opportunity is real, and it is going on with another opportunity that this new situation creates, and this is the opportunity to put the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in its real context. It's not the major problem of the Middle East. It is a problem, it should be solved. It cannot be solved right now, as long as the Palestinians are not ready to accept in any way any sort of Jewish sovereignty anywhere. But that doesn't mean that because of that, we cannot deal with the wider problems of the Middle East. We can, and we should do it together with our allies in the pragmatic part of the Middle East. And finally, it is also, there is also an opportunity here to clarify our security concerns, because we had a lot of time to spend on explaining why it is so necessary for us to keep the Golan Heights. Okay, now I think nobody anymore thinks that we should give up the Golan Heights, right? We had some difficulties to explain what are the security concerns we have about our presence, that force us to keep our presence in the Jordan Valley. I think now it's much easier to understand why it is so necessary for Israel to maintain and to retain presence in the Jordan Valley, and why the kind of entity the Palestinians may have in the future still should be in a way, in such a way that would not create another Islamic state just next to our doorstep. All of these are much easier, and in the longer run, maybe it's going to be maybe even easier to explain why Israel is such a huge asset for the West in its presence where it is, and in the way it protects and helps the pragmatic elements in the Middle East. Thank you very much.